Hello and welcome to this CNBC Africa special. I'm Chris Bishop. And we have for you today 60 minutes with President Cyril Ramaphosa on the cusp of a huge investment conference here in Johannesburg with millions of dollars for Africa on the line. We look into the issues around it and also delve into the economy that's at stake. The conference is the brainchild, undoubtedly, of South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, who plans this year a 1.2 trillion rand target for investment in an economy that probably needs it more than most. Hello and welcome to this exclusive interview with South Africa's President on the business, economics and the direction of this economy. We'll be taking the interactive approach. We'll be crossing live to our bureaus in Lagos, in Kigali for questions. Plus also, we have an audience here in the studio and we'll be going to the investment for itself in Sandton for questions from top business names. So just to start off with our bureaus, we're just checking in. We've got our correspondents there, starting with Kenneth Ibamore in Lagos, who's going to be asking a question from Nigeria.
All right, Chris. Yeah, we're looking forward to the interaction, and I hope it goes very well.
And who have you got for us?
Yeah, so we have Bismarck Rwanda, he's the CEO of Financial Derivatives, and we also have George Etomi, is a principal partner for George Etomi and Partners. They'll be asking questions to the president to get some insights into how Nigeria and South Africa can better cooperate. And
we have Arnold Kwizera in Kigali. Who you got to pose a question for the president?
Thank you very much, Chris. In studio, we have the CEO of the Rwanda Stock Exchange, Pierre Celestin Rabukumba. He's going to be talking about investments. Let's not forget, South Africa is the biggest FDI investor into sub-Saharan Africa in the past 2 years. So he has a few questions for the president on that regard.
And finally, Kopano Gumbi, who's at the investment conference itself, what this day is all about. Kopano, who are you going to be getting for us?
Thanks, Chris. I will have Nolita Fakute, the chairperson of Anglo-American South Africa, with me shortly.
Thank you very much, Kopano Gumbi. And Mr. President in the studio, thank you very much for joining us today, taking time out. It would be remiss of me not to mention you're fresh back from Japan and the World Cup. You got in about midnight last night, I understand.
Indeed, indeed.
What's that mean? You're the third head of state to have lifted the World Cup now. That moment, what did it mean for you and the players there?
Well, it was an incredible moment of great achievement by our team, but they also knew that the achievement they managed to record was for South Africa. Before they played, I spoke to them and I said they've got 57 million South Africans cheering them, and they must stand on those shoulders and go and do their very best. And I'm delighted that they were able to do that. Initially, when I spoke to them, I think they lied to me because they said they were nervous. But the more I looked at their faces and their eyes and shook their hands, I realized that they were as committed and steely and as determined as could be. And that's why they were able to deliver the incredible victory for us.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people have asked you since you've been back. What exactly did Siya Kolisi and Prince Harry, what were they saying to you? I saw they were spending a lot of time whispering in your ear.
With Siya Kolisi, he just was really over the moon, and he said, "President, I told you we could do it." And he just kept repeating that, and I said, "I'm so delighted that you are the very first captain who has come from the dusty streets of a township who has achieved this phenomenal victory, and the first black one in the history of the world who has achieved this." And that is a huge accolade for the young man. And we were just exchanging those. But with Prince Harry, it was wonderful just to have an exchange with him. I had met him previously, so there was a good rapport between us. And we were both able to say to each other, "May the best team win." And indeed.
So it was.
And so it was.
But back home and down to earth, unfortunately, the night before, this country missed a downgrade by Moodys, the last ratings agency keeping us investment grade by the skin of its teeth. How concerned are you with that as we go into an investment conference here?
Well, obviously, I'm concerned, my colleagues in Cabinet are concerned, and indeed all of us as South Africans, we should be concerned. And Moodys really is looking at the fiscal challenges that we face. And we've always known that in order to repair our state-owned enterprises, which were debilitated with dysfunctionality and corruption over the past few years, it would bring us where we are, where we've got to bail them out. Now, unfortunately, the biggest and the most important, which is Eskom, has to be bailed out because it is just too big to fail. And it therefore has a negative impact on our fiscal prudence. We therefore have to find ways, and that's the one they're focusing more of their attention on. And in doing so, they are obviously saying that we've got to curb expenditure right across, which the Minister of Finance has sought to do to a large extent. We will be reducing expenditure of about 150 billion rand over in the next 3 years, which is quite a sizable amount of money.
A lot of people have expressed doubt that I've talked to, analysts, that South Africa can actually do this and continue to function. How are you going to achieve this?
Well, we think we will be able to find ways and means of being able to do that. With regard to Eskom, we are going to soon announce a CEO and a revamped board who are going to have a very clear mandate of how they should manage the finances of Eskom. And that in many ways will contribute towards reducing Eskom's liability on us in many ways, particularly when we embark on the restructuring. Because when we break it up into the three parts, we'll be able to spread the debt amongst the three entities, and that should reduce to a large extent the challenges that Eskom faces, and thereafter the collections that will follow, getting people to pay, will help to reduce the expenditure level in Eskom.
But as you know, there's already resistance to this plan, especially, I mean, even from the National Union of Mineworkers, the very union that you founded 30 odd years ago. They're saying that they're not going to let it happen. They're not going to let the breakup. They're not going to let the cutbacks. What are you going to do about that?
Well, you see, that is born out of possibly a lack of full understanding of precisely what this is meant to do. Because we've got a situation here that is untenable. And once you have an untenable situation, you've got to look at options. What are the options? What other options are there for us other than to do what we're doing? There are no other viable options. So we are going to continue talking to all the people who have got doubts. And slowly they will come into the crawl.
And you asked, during the budget, and your finance minister said they wanted people to be patriotic and get into patriotic negotiations with you. It's a great thing, surely, but a lot of people in these particular times are looking at their pay packets. They're a bit more self-interested than they should be.
Well, people are oriented in that way naturally. Everybody looks at their pay packets. If you're sitting at a table, everybody always looks at what have you got on your plate that I don't have. So that is natural. And you've got to mediate amongst all those interests. And in the end, convince everyone that we should all have a common interest. And what we're seeking to do is to drum up a lot of support for a common vision. Because all of us as South Africans must have a common vision. We must look at the outcomes that we want to achieve. And we will, in the next few months, be doing precisely that, get everyone to look at a future, a shared future, which is beneficial to all, and not only to sectional interests. And where people believe that there are sectional interests that are being served, let us discuss those and find how we resolve those issues. I am a firm believer in getting people to align their interests to become common interests. And so I think we will be able to do that.
I have no doubt at all, Mr. President, that you can convince people in South Africa to go along with you. But what about the ratings agencies? They're still pouring doubt on this country's ability to A, cut back its spending, B, make the changes and the reforms that it needs to make in the next few years. I mean, how much could this downgrade, if it does come, be a vote of no confidence in your government?
Well, on the reform side, we're making tremendous progress, and the conference, I'll be able to report on enormous reforms that are now unfolding and are underway. And fortunately, and the good thing that is that we are actually embarking on those reforms in full consultation with those who have raised concerns about the reforms. For instance, to give you a good example, forestry companies come to us and say we need water licenses, and we discuss with the Water Authority, and in no time we're able to resolve precisely that problem. And we don't only resolve it for those players, but for all players in the industry, that water licenses must be granted within a short space of time. So that is a reform that they have raised that is needed. And we will be able to demonstrate that we are committed to effecting those reforms, irrevocably committed, and there's no holy cow in as far as we are concerned. So the reform process is underway, and as it gets underway, we will be able to curb expenditure as much as we possibly can to ensure that our fiscal position is a lot better than what it is.
But a lot of people's complaints, I think, I mean, I've been out talking to business types the last few weeks since we agreed the interview, and a lot of people are saying it's the pace of it that worries them. They want more reforms, they want quick, they want these holy cows to be slaughtered and gone, you know. And a lot of people think you aren't moving fast enough.
Yeah, indeed. Everybody wants the reforms to have been done yesterday. And unfortunately, some of those are embedded in regulatory processes that are, you know, part of the laws or the regulations that we have. But what we have done is to give people a good line of sight that we are committed to a reform trajectory, and we are going to embark on those reforms. And some will take time. I mean, one of the things they always complain about is that a lot of money was stolen and siphoned out of state-owned enterprises. Why are people not getting arrested? Why are people not in jails and so forth? And we say that too has to wait for the process that we've got embedded in our laws and in our constitution, because the president can't just rush in and say arrest this one and that one and put them in jail. We've got to rely on our institutions. And it is for this reason that right from the start, when I came in, I said we are going to repair our institutions, reposition our institution, strengthen them, and a number of them were weakened along the way. So they are now becoming stronger, they are now becoming bolder, and they are going to pounce. They are definitely going to start doing their work.
Because that's one of the great complaints that a lot of business people out there. If you recall Davos in 2018, we were at dinner there, and you said your strategy was clear. Anybody who breaks the law will go behind the bars of a jail.
Absolutely.
People are out there saying, why isn't it happening? Why is America going after the Gupta family? Why isn't this country going after the Gupta family and people who may have taken things?
Yeah, America have different laws than we do. And they are able to issue, you know, sanctions against anyone they want around the world. We don't have those types of laws. And people need to understand that, because it's very easy to be sensational and say, America did it, why can't you do it? Our legal and jurisprudence is very, very different. But at the same time, the commitment from the president right through to the structures is that we are going to ensure that there's rule of law in our country. Rule of law had been broken. We're making sure that there will be rule of law. Our institutions that ensure that there should be rule of law are going to do their work, and they will do their work without any fear, favor, or prejudice. And they will do, and when they do their work, people will be awed and say, wow, we didn't realize that it would have this type of effect.
We'll go to our first question from the floor now. Mr. Ronnie Ntuli, a young entrepreneur. Please ask the President.
Excellency, Mr. President, I would stand, but I've been instructed to sit.
Sit down,
Ronnie. Considering the intra-Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, one evolving industrial global value chains, how do we leverage our fairly advanced transportation and logistics sector, for example, one, to strengthen South Africa's position, but also to support the continent of Africa?
Well, one of the greatest things that has evolved on our continent is obviously the formation of the AU, which has brought all countries on the continent together, and signing up on the Africa that we want, Agenda 63. But more importantly is the trade aspect of our lives, because trade and the economy affects the lives of all the more than 1 billion people who live on our continent. So the Africa Free Trade Area Agreement is a major boost. And that is the one that we say not only South Africa, but the entire continent must try and leverage on, because it yields enormous opportunities for all of us. We as South Africans are looking forward to this as a major boost to our economy from a manufacturing point of view, but also to the industrialization of our economy and bringing in new industrialists, those black people in our economy who were previously prevented from playing a key role in the economy of their own country will now be able to play that role as they manufacture goods and as they provide services that could be channeled into a number of countries on the continent. Already, South African companies are present in many, many countries on the continent. But this is just like going to be a rocket booster for many of them. And of course, as you correctly say, infrastructure and logistics are going to be really the pillars on which the effectiveness and the success of this Africa Free Trade Agreement is going to stand. And we see it as a great opportunity, not a challenge, a great opportunity, so that we build rail lines, railroads, and roads and bridges, and it's going to unleash the power of Africa in ways that even our forebears who formed the OAU had never envisaged. So this is the moment that our continent has been waiting for, and we are going to grasp it, all of us. The wonderful thing about this is that whenever the heads of state meet these days, it's no longer just talking politics and politics. It's now talking about trade and the economy, and which for me is a major achievement, because that's what we want to focus on.
Just one quick question before we go to the next one. I mean, there's still a number of nations that haven't finally ratified this African Free Trade Area. Are you not concerned about that?
No, I'm not concerned, because they are far in between and few. Your major ones have signed up. Some took some time as they were still dotting the I's and crossing the T's. Like South Africa, we took our time as we were studying it very closely. Nigeria came in, and when the bigger ones, the bigger economies signed up, we knew that it was systems go.
Okay, next question from Amin Taya, the Managing Executive of Investment Cluster at ABSA.
Thank you, Mr. President, Your Excellency. Firstly, I must say you look very refreshed from flying such a long distance from Japan overnight. Look, I think we all know what the problems are. This is a great moment of reset. I want to build on something I think yourself and Chris spoke about, which is the ability to execute. Yes. I think we've got great laid plans, and I've got no doubt, maybe there's some doubt in some of the other experts about our ability to come up with a credible 150 billion plan. I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is more a cultural accountability issue within sectors of government. And my question to you is, are we going to improve that? How will we improve this ability to execute with greater speed and focus?
One of the challenges that we face is that the capability of the state has been severely weakened and reduced. So that is the one problem that we've got to deal with. And to address this, we're strengthening the state in more ways than one. But one of the things that I did last night was to appoint Dr. Ramaphosa to become one person in my office who is going to head up an office which is going to focus on execution, on investments, interact with investors in removing the blockages, looking at how through that office that we're setting up, we're going to be able to be supportive to investors and also be able to nudge and carol the various departments in government to implement the policies that we've embarked upon or taken. Because there's always, as governments are all over the world, a slow-paced type of way of doing things, and this is going to inject more energy. So I've got a warm body, and we'll be having more warm bodies in the presidency to ensure that we do actually implement what we have said we will implement. I mean, to give you a very good example, when it came to, say, for instance, the water license, even the spectrum, for instance, we said the spectrum should be released, and it took quite a number of weeks, and it was not moving as fast as I wanted it to move. Now, with a warm body and warm bodies like that, we're now going to inject energy and say, every day, what's happening every day, instead of me waiting for a report every month. So we're getting things done. As it is now, after the jobs summit, we said that there are quite a number of jobs that we can create, but there was slow-paced movement, and I decided that I want to meet all the social partners, business, labor, government, and all of them, every first Monday of the month. So we meet and we do, in a very sort of particularized way. We go through everything that is a logjam, a constraint, and we crunch numbers, and we look at the jobs that have been lost, the jobs that have been gained. And I should not be doing this as president, but I've committed that I'm going to do it if we're going to get this whole system going. And once it gains traction, then I'll leave it to the people who can do it well, because now it's gained momentum. That's the way to get things done from a broken type of dispensation that we had. You've got to, have a rocket booster type of situation.
Thank you so much. Just one thing, quick one before we go. I mean, give us an idea. Everyone talks about this lost 9-10 years or whatever. How broken was the system then when you took over?
It is actually quite a challenge, because the years of state capture basically meant that a number of systems and processes were either overlooked, they were set aside to achieve certain purposes. And so that is what you now need to re-engineer. It's a re-engineering process, and getting people to be properly aligned to the goals that we want to achieve, to face in the right direction, and get everyone to be energized to do the right things. So that in itself should be a challenge, but I see it as an opportunity, because it talks to renewal, it talks to revival, it talks to doing things in a new way. And as we're crossing this river, we're putting our feet on each stone as we cross the river, discovering new ways of doing things, discovering wonderful people along the way who can actually get the whole systems moving.
Just one last question. How concerned are you that the people out there are perhaps not as patient as you are in this whole thing?
I'm impatient as well. I'm very impatient, and it is for this reason that we're setting up all these structures and processes and appointing all these people, because I am very impatient, and the impatience that our people have, I feel it. I also feel the heat. And so therefore, that is what is propelling me to move forward. And it's good. It's good that our people are impatient, because they want the best that this country can yield for them. And that is what we've got to deliver. So the impatience helps us, and obviously they want much faster pace, and we will get up to the speed that our people want.
Okay, go to our third question from the floor, Mr. Thomas Schaefer, CEO of Volkswagen here in South Africa, a man who oversees the construction and export of more than 100,000 cars from this country every year. Mr. Schaefer.
Yeah, Mr. President, good morning.
Good morning.
Coming back to the African Continental Free Trade Area, my question would be, how can we as business, specifically automotive business, help the government to attract more investment to unlock the opportunities that we have in the intercontinental trade?
Gee, I like what you're saying now. I really do. Because what I've been saying to my colleagues we should do is to have a forum with our South African businesses to discuss in a very introspective way what opportunities are opening up with the Africa Free Trade Agreement and how we can work with business to harness these opportunities that are out there and how we can support our businesses as well. Because believe you me, our businesses also need our support because a number of territories where they go to are slightly different from what we have. They're very challenging, they're very testing, and so therefore we need to have that symbiotic relationship with our businesses so that we can support each other. We want our businesses to succeed, but we also want our businesses as they surge into the continent to behave and to deport themselves in the best ethical way. Because if they don't, they could fall foul of a whole number of other things out there. So we want them to represent the flag, the country properly and to conduct business in the same way that they do conduct it here. So there is a need for a forum, a discussion, which I want to convene so that we can all get together and understand precisely what those businesses are. What is it that you want, components or whatever, finished goods or whatever, and then we support our businesses as they surge into the continent.
Mr. President, I was reading the other day how you said you found it quite draining sometimes to represent South Africa outside the continent. Now, in this new era of free trade, your finance minister called it the story of the 21st century. Isn't there a very difficult thin line you're going to have to walk? Because I've worked in a lot of countries on this continent down the years, and the view of South Africa is that they're Big Brother, they're the United States, they're the ones with all the money in the industry who want to dictate to the rest of the continent. Surely that's going to create a lot of difficulties for you.
Ordinarily it could, but we have decided that our foreign policy is going to be pivoted around prospering your neighbor as you want to prosper, so that we do not see ourselves playing an over-domineering role. We are, the people who measure these things say we're the second largest economy. We're the most industrialized economy on the continent, and so therefore we've got a lot of advantages that we can rely on. But that should never make us arrogant. That should actually make us humble. That should make us more collaborative. That should make us to want with others in a very cooperative way. So cooperation is what we are going to be championing. As we accede to the chair of the AU in January, that is the type of approach that we're going to use. And our main objective is going to be promoting trade, economic growth, and of course silencing the guns. But more importantly, we are also going to be harping more and more on the empowerment of women and young people on our continent, opening up opportunities for them. And that we will do in a way where we cooperate with all countries, and they should see us as a partner. They should see us more as a cooperative type of interlocutor rather than a domineering interlocutor.
Well, speaking about the continent, we have our first question coming in from across the continent. We're going to our Lagos bureau where Bismarck Rwani is there. Now, he's an economic advisor to President Muhammadu Buhari, and he has a question for our President Cyril Ramaphosa. Bismarck.
Yes, good morning, Mr. President. My question is about unemployment and the income inequality. I see that South Africa has a Gini coefficient of 63.3, which makes it one of the highest in the world, with a high unemployment rate and slow growth. What are you doing, what do you seek to do to address this issue? Because there's a strong correlation between the income inequality and the crime rate in many countries. This is very important for us as we look at trans-African trade and investment.
Well, we've got a number of challenges. Our key challenges in our country is unemployment, inequality, and poverty. Those are the triple challenges that we are always seeking to address and to reduce. You say we are one of the unequal societies in the world. We are, unfortunately, the most unequal society in the world. And this emanates from our history of inequality, where a minority were so well endowed with nearly everything, or endowed themselves with nearly everything, resources, skills, and opportunities, to the point where the majority of our population were relegated to the back. And this is what has stayed with us for quite a while. Much as we have improved the livelihoods of the majority of our people, the inequality issue and unemployment still holds us back. And it is for this reason that we are holding this type of investment conference, where we are seeking to raise, this time round, another 300 billion rand, which would be about $20 billion. Last year we raised exactly the same amount. We're hoping to raise a little bit more as investment from both local and foreign investors, so that we can boost the economic fortunes of our country. Because it is through investment in a number of sectors of our economy that we are able to create jobs. We have been creating jobs on a year-to-year basis, but our job creation effort has not kept up with the number of new entrants who come into the job market. So we're wanting to balance that and exceed that so that there's a bit of a surplus. So we are working extremely hard, and you're absolutely right in saying that there's a correlation between poverty, inequality, and the crime rate. And this is precisely where we are as South Africa. So we therefore want to go to the root cause and deal with the issue of poverty, and by so doing, it will also impact on inequality.
So we're going out live again for another question. There's some a bit closer to home, the Sandton Convention Centre, the venue of the big conference this week, and it's from Nolita Fakude, the chairperson of Anglo American. Nolita.
Thank you very much. Good morning, President Ramaphosa.
Morning, Nolita.
Well, the mining sector. Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity. The mining sector has been a significant contributor to the economic development of South Africa over the years, President. And so, in your view, what is it that we can continue to do as an industry with government to make sure that we continue to play this role of an investor in the sector? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nolita. First of all, I think I need to applaud you and your Anglo-American family, that Anglo-American is remaining invested in our economy and is committing more and more investments, as you will be announcing, I guess, at the conference later today, and for sponsoring the conference. Mining is the bedrock of the South African economy. And we are what we are as a country in terms of economic development because of the mining sector. It's been sliding down over years, and we would like to reboost it. I see mining as a sunrise sector in our economy, and we want to ensure that it continues to grow and it continues to prosper. And we're delighted that we've got mining companies like yours, and a number of other emerging ones. And let's be very, very positive about the transformation that has been taking place in the mining sector, where in the past few years we did not have a single black-owned mining company. We now have quite a number of them, and we've got a number of mine owners who are engineers, who are investors, and that has come about because of the transformation process that we've been involved in. Now we want to use that foundation to enhance the greater growth of the industry, and government is going to remain committed to supporting the mining industry. And the other good thing and positive thing is that whenever there have been problems, we've been able to sit down with mine owners and mine managers and discuss those challenges And with that, the future is bright for the mining industry.
With that, we're crossing over to East Africa now, to a man with his finger on the pulse of business in the region, Pierre Celestine Rabukumba, the CEO of the Rwanda Stock Exchange. Celestine, nice to speak to you again. What is your question for the President?
Thank you, Mr. President. In the wake of global trade wars, America versus China, of recent we've had Nigeria closing its borders, South Africa being cited for inward looking by the Africa Outlook reports by Africa Development Bank. What is your take, specific actions you think that South Africa, as a leading country on our continent, should be doing specifically for our Africa Free Trade Agreement?
Well, I was a bit taken aback when the report said we're inward looking, because in real effect, South Africa isn't. I have been traveling in a number of countries on our continent. Recently, I went to Tanzania alone, and I found that there were 228 companies from South Africa that operate there. And indeed, if you go throughout the continent, you'll find that there are a number of South African companies that trade there. From a government point of view, we've got missions in nearly all the African countries on our continent. And so in that alone, we are more of an outward-looking type of South Africa. But we want to enhance that. That is why the Africa Free Trade Area Agreement is going to be for us a major beneficial effect, because we are going to be able to utilize that to move goods from a non-tariff point of view and services, and our people will be able to move around the continent as well. So for us, this is a real great opportunity to develop our own economy. But as I said earlier, we would like to see the economies of other countries develop. As you well know, we are part of the SADC region, and in the SADC region, we're focusing on industrialization of our region and boosting intra-regional trade, and we want to start trading more effectively with other regions on our continent. And the Africa Free Trade Area Agreement just gives us that greater opportunity, which we are going to exploit to good effect. So South Africa is going to be open much more for business and for trading and for investment. So, and we also want other countries, by the way, to come and invest in South Africa. This has been for me a sore point, because not many African companies have been investing in our economy, and we therefore want to enhance trade. I want to be drinking more and more coffee from Rwanda, Uganda, and places like that, rather than coffee from Colombia and places outside our continent. And we want those companies to come and invest in our economy as well.
Well, there's another point, Mr. President. I mean, I've been privileged to report on the Rwandan economy for the last 15 years and seen it grow from almost nothing.
Yes.
And one thing it has that other economies don't is its openness and its willingness to do business. What do you think an industrialized nation like South Africa can learn from a small country like Rwanda punching above its weight?
Well, we're learning quite a lot from Rwanda. Rwanda has achieved phenomenal feats. For starters, I've had a number of people from our local government sector going to Rwanda just to go and see how clean Kigali is, the cleanest city on the whole continent. And I've said, emulate them, try and be like them, and even beat them and get better than Kigali. But in terms of just their business savviness, their regulatory framework, and their being a more open economy, we have a lot to learn from them. For instance, when they say they have a one-stop shop, they mean it in real effect. You get to Rwanda, you open a business, same day you'll have all your permits. We're doing exactly the same thing. Minister Ibrahim Patel was demonstrating how we are now acceding to that, where in one day, in a few hours, you'll be able to have all your permits, to get your company registered, get your tax certificate, and all the other permits you'll be able to get. So we are learning from others, and this is the beauty of being all united as part of the African Union, that we can learn from one another, we can exchange good lessons, and we can emulate what they are doing best. And if they are doing wrong things, we can learn from that and say, we're not going to do that, we're not going to repeat what they are doing. And that is the beauty of our continent.
We're going back across the continent now to Lagos, to another question from Nigeria, from George Itomi, the principal partner of George Itomi and Partners. George, what is your question?
Thank you, Mr. President. Congratulations again for the victory in the Rugby World Cup.
Thank you very much.
It very much feels like a victory for the entire continent. Now my question is, how do we convert successes in the field of sports to economic prosperity for our people? I ask because the two largest economies in Africa, South Africa and Nigeria, have practices that border on discrimination, the xenophobia in South Africa, border closure, all targeted at Africans. How do we change this narrative?
Well, thank you very much for your congratulatory words, and I think you're absolutely right. You've got a very beautiful background there. I don't know whether it's the river or the sea, but it's wonderful. We don't have that. Yeah,
Victoria Island.
Victoria Island. You're absolutely right. Sports can be used as a unifier. And we've seen it in our own nation in 1995, leading up to now. Our people are energized with this victory, and we obviously want to project it also as a victory for the continent. That much as South Africa is the top rugby playing nation on the continent, would like to see more other African countries playing rugby. So that we as a continent can begin to make a real meaningful presence in that, because it will not only unify our own nation but the continent as well. Now, obviously we face a number of challenges. The challenge that you alluded to in relation to South Africa, where foreign nationals were subjected to some pressures and actions, and where, for instance, in Nigeria, there are border closures. So these are challenges that we face on a periodic basis on our continent. And I believe we now need to sit down as leaders and as countries and address these challenges, because they are born out of exclusivity. People want to be exclusive and don't want to be so inclusive. And there are those tendencies, whether we like it or not, they are there, and we need to ensure we address them. These are fault lines, and the best way of dealing with a fault line is to keep on closing that fault line. I mean, for instance, in our own country, racism will remain a fault line, and we need to continue taking action to close that fault line so that it never opens up into a big gash and descend the whole country into unpalatable situations.
We're just going to go, George has one quick follow-up question in Lagos. Do carry on, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to take us to the question of energy. Energy is a major challenge in Africa and threatens all we hope for under the African Continental Free Trade Area. South Africa too is grappling with it, but far ahead the rest of Africa. How do we address the energy challenge?
Well, energy really is the flywheel that propels any economy. And we've been well endowed with a very good energy capacity over the many years. But with time, with our power stations aging, some of them between 37 years and 40 something years, our energy resource is becoming smaller and smaller, and it's shrinking, and it's facing enormous challenges. And I think in the end, we need to raise our eyes and raise our gaze, beyond the horizon. The world is having to deal with energy challenges, and we're well endowed with sun, wind, and water, and those are renewable energy sources that we now need to opt for. And I would say that Africa, where it is now, it needs to move more in the direction of renewable energy and utilize the gift that God has given us, the sun and the wind and water, to generate energy. So if we go for those energy sources and boost our energy components, it will be a lot better. And it's becoming cheaper and cheaper to go for renewable energy from solar and hydro and wind as well. And we need to focus on that a lot more. One, because it's cheaper, it can be done quickly, and that in itself requires that we should be flexible and agile ourselves in terms of our policy frameworks and in terms of our execution as well.
Mr. President, I have a question on that. I followed that independent power producers story very closely, people creating power from solar and wind, as you say.
Yeah.
And one thing I can say is that they actually had a terrible time trying to get those things. They were signed late. There was all kinds of last-minute negotiations which deterred their investment. Surely that isn't a country that wants to look to the future of wind and solar, surely?
Well, you see, the more we are embracing renewable energy sources, the more our own policy framework opens up and makes it much more doable. And at the execution level, we will go beyond these hurdles and make everything to be more seamless, to happen much more quickly without any impediments. So those are just initial stages of challenges, but we will get over that.
But I know a lot of investors who are deterred by that whole process.
No, but you see, South Africa has been the leading country in renewable energy over the past few years. We led the charge, and we opened up renewable energy installation, and that is serving the country extremely well. The installed capacity keeps growing and growing. We now have a new window that we need to look at, and that too is precisely where we are going to be focusing our attention on. So all these things do happen as we move on. We're crossing the river by feeling our way on the stones, but cross the river we shall, and we are going to cross this river.
But in terms of getting this country away from coal as well, I mean, it's still 80% of all the energy that we use, but it's going to be like a Herculean effort and take a lot of money to do, which probably the government doesn't have right now.
Well, if you look at the integrated energy plan that we've put on the table, we've said we remain committed to a mixed energy architecture or landscape, where we will have all these coal, because we still are well endowed with coal, and quite a number of our power stations are still coal-generated power stations, but we've also boosting our other areas of energy. Nuclear is one, which we've kept on the table. That nuclear has served us well in the past, much as it is a much smaller one, and we will opt for nuclear at a time and at a pace when we can afford it. So that also remains an option. And then there is wind, solar, as well as hydro. So and gas. And a combination of all these gives us a wonderful suite of energy resource capability. And we should be able to move forward. And of course, as we move on, coal is going to recede more and more, because a number of our power stations are aged and they have to be retired. So we're going to see a wonderful mosaic of energy source as we move on.
But as far as I understand it, there is no new nuclear in the new IRP, and the last time it was suggested by the previous president, there was a huge furore about it. What are you going to do about that?
Well, it is there as an option for us to go for. Right now, we have...
An expensive option.
Well, it is an expensive option, but at the time, it was meant to go to up to 8,000 megawatts, which is huge. But we are saying we will opt for nuclear at a pace, I repeat, at a time, I repeat, at a cost that we can afford. It is a good, safe, and renewable type of energy source, which many countries are using around the world. They built those ones when they could afford it. Right now, we cannot afford it, but it's an option that is open for us. So we haven't closed the door on nuclear, and in fact, we are going to be revitalizing Koeberg so that it gives us a few more years to go forward. So it remains part of our architecture, and we are going to be boosting the others as we move on.
Mr. President, I think we've started something in Lagos. Bismarck Rwani wishes to ask one more question to you from Nigeria. Mr. Rwani.
Yeah, Mr. President, my question is on aviation. South Africa Airways was a leading airline across Africa and a network carrier. Recently, they've been reporting huge losses, and the question is, are you really going to allow the privatization of this airline so that it can actually optimize the resources before it, or what kind of solutions do you have? Because this airline was really a great airline and has been suffering and hemorrhaging over the past few years. What's the plan here?
Well, you know, the aviation industry is an industry that faces enormous challenges, and you will have seen that a number of more developed economies have had to address the challenges that they faced in this regard. Our airline, South African Airways, was like one of the best state-owned enterprise, and it has fallen on hard times and is making huge losses on a continuous basis. And it has led us to finally say that what we now need is to get a strategic equity partner who can come and help us reposition the airline, because we continue to bail it out on an ongoing basis. And there are a number of options that we are also looking at. So it's the nation's flag carrier, but at the same time, it is in need of a strategic equity partner so that it can operate a lot better than it has in the past few years.
Okay, well, we've got just time for a couple of questions from the floor here. Our man will pass among you with a microphone. Who's the first volunteer? And just Gloria Sarobi.
I can stand, Mr. President. I was nervous about this, talking to you and sitting down. Thank you. Mr. President, it's not the first time South Africa is in a junk status.
Yes.
That's what you inherited.
Yeah.
In 1994. It took longer to get into an investment grade. We're back there again. It might be shorter, at least because the base is better. On the SOEs, that's my question. Because they have the same shareholder, especially those that are 100%, have you thought of putting them together, forcing them to work with each other? Because they have the same shareholder, they have the same balance sheet that they are dragging down. And the rating agencies are looking for release from the SOEs, from that balance sheet. It helps a lot when the different CFOs have a plan together, including the funding plan. When they go to road shows, when they go to lenders, they're speaking to the same person and defending the same shareholder. Have you thought of almost encouraging them to work together? Thank you.
We are in the process of appointing and finalizing our state-owned enterprise council. And one of the tasks it is going to have is to look at the full, if you like, architecture of our state-owned enterprises. We've got something like 700 state-owned entities. Some are very small and minuscule, but some are the big hitters that we keep on a radar screen, and we've got three sort of divisions. We've got the green, we've got the amber, and we've got the red. And we keep seeing which one is moving into amber and which one is moving into red. And they all have their own balance sheets, and some of them have balance sheets that are under great stress. And the thought has occurred on whether, as we get the state-owned enterprise council going, whether you should not look at finding synergies amongst all of them, synergies that go beyond just your board functionality, your management capability, that also go to your balance sheet management and your financial discipline. So those 4 areas, and of course there will also be the labor component, those 5 areas are areas that need to be looked at more closely to see whether we cannot move in the direction that you are saying, because the economies of scale that we would have just in some way agglomerating all this, which could boost, if you like, the balance sheet of the sovereign, would be enormous. And we would then be able also to rely on the economies of scale when it comes to procurement, when it comes to a whole lot of ways of doing things, including interfacing with investors, financiers, and bondholders, because many of them go out on their own. Transnet goes out, they go to bondholders, and Eskom does that, and we often talk to the same people. And if you had the same type of story and same type of presentation where you presented the sovereign in a much more positive way, it would get people to sit up. I'm convinced about that. So the State-Owned Enterprise Council that is soon going to be announced will need to look at precisely that. And I must say that the men and the women we're going to appoint there are going to have a huge challenge, but a wonderful challenge as well, to serve the nation in a very proactive way.
There's one final question from Mr. Bobby Malab.
Good morning, Mr. President. The producer signaled that I can talk to you sitting down, so please not disrespect.
That's fine.
I know that one of your most enduring passions is education.
Yes, sir.
You've been involved in this for many, many times, all the work that you've done with Shanduka the last decade or so. With the advent of the 4th Industrial Revolution, how do you think about how this impacts our more traditional educational basis? How do we transform this in a more sustainable way for generations to come?
Yes, that's a very interesting question. We've inherited a really terrible system of education in our country, where the evil rulers of the past decided that they are just going to ensure that the black child, from an education point of view, is debilitated and rendered incapable. So we've had to be dealing with all that and repositioning our education system. And I often say that in any given year, we have 1 million young people who enroll for school, and they're supposed to stay in the system for 12 years. By the 12th year, half of them have exited the system. And I'm now saying we need to ask ourselves, where are they? What are they doing? Where have they gone to? They are alive because not all of them would have died. And those are the people who are unskilled, uneducated, not in education, that our education system, our skills provision system needs to look at. And yesterday with business leaders, we're looking at how we can become more agile in giving some skills to those people so that they become economically active, whilst at the same time focusing on those who have gone through. We've gone through your grade 12s, because those are now ready for the 4th Industrial Revolution. They are ready for the other skills that the nation can offer them. And this is where, for instance, the free education process that the young people advocated for successfully comes into play. We need to improve that education for those who are still in the 12-year run of the year of school and beyond that. But more importantly, Bobby, as you correctly say, the fourth industrial revolution beckons. We've got to open up opportunities, enormous opportunities for young people. And I found that our young people are talented, they are committed, they want to learn, they want to contribute, they want to do things, and they are innovative. We are their problem. We are the problem to them because we're not opening up pathways and channels. We therefore need to open more channels and pathways so that these young people can, furl their wings and just fly. So this is the real challenge that awaits us.
One last question from Renuka Metil, the editor of Forbes Africa magazine.
Hello, Mr. President. Such an honor to be in this audience listening to you. Stronger women equal stronger nations. How are you ensuring that South Africa will be safer for women who are on the streets? How will you ensure? How are you ensuring that the streets are safe for women in South Africa?
For women?
Yes.
Yes. As I said earlier, one of the areas that I'd like to focus on as we chair the African Union is the empowerment of women. If you empower women, you empower the nation. If you focus on giving women opportunities to lead, to be in business, to provide for their families, to bring up their children properly, and to educate them, you have basically freed the nation and you have truly empowered the nation. And that is what I'd like to focus on, and this is what my own administration is also focusing on. The empowerment of women is an overriding issue as far as I'm concerned. And I've said to every department that I'd like to see the programs that you have to empower women, but it should also start with budgeting. And this is the message that I'd like to spread to my other colleagues also, that the budgeting process, as we craft our budgets, we must be focusing more and more on empowering the women of our continent and making sure that they have options, because by and large in any nation, they are the most, oppressed, relegated to the back in the household and menial jobs, and they are as talented, if not more talented than men. And this is an economic resource from a skills point of view, from a work point of view, and from a talent point of view that we are neglecting. And we will never be whole unless we unleash the power that women can contribute to our nations.
And during the preparation for this interview, CNBC Africa went out to the streets and spoke to just everyday citizens. What would their question be for the president? Just have a listen to this.
Okay.
Well, I think most importantly, what his strategy would be for getting more South Africans into the lower and middle income tax brackets, and thereby hopefully improving the economy.
They are increasing the tax base of the country. How do you propose to do that?
Well, it's interesting that an ordinary citizen should say that we should increase the tax base. It basically means that we need to make sure that people, they earn a living. They are economically engaged and can earn a living so that they can pay their taxes. It remains a sad thing, as I heard a statistic the other day, that there are only some 4 million people in our country who earn 15,000 and above. And once you earn below 15,000, it basically means that you are in income poverty. You are making ends meet on an ongoing basis. You are living from hand to mouth, which is a major, major challenge. And many of those people don't pay taxes. So we then need to get more and more people into employment, and meaningful employment, or into businesses, so that they run successful businesses where we support their small, medium enterprises, and we enable industrialists to come to the fore so that they can run businesses, be profitable, as well as employ people. So there's a lot of work that is cut out for us, but we are determined to do that because that is the only way in which we can empower the nation as a whole.
We have another question from the streets for you, Mr. President. Let's hear what they have to say.
If I had one question to ask the president, I will ask him, what are you doing about these xenophobic attacks? Because things that are happening out there, it's like nothing has been done about it. I've been here for 25 years. I consider South Africa as my country. I've been here, like all of my childhood has been here. But there's so much happening. You go somewhere, you want to go for a policy, and when you want to claim, they're telling you that, yes, you have an ID, but you're not South African.
I'm sure that's a question you're going to be asked at this conference, when you're asked about security. Also, what's the future for people who come and invest from other parts of Africa?
Well, it's a major problem and a challenge, and as you well know, we had a very, very bad taste of it in the past few months. Not only that, but also gender-based violence. So we're having to deal with these two terrible ills in society. Gender-based violence, where men of our country have declared war on the women of our country. And on the other hand, where this tendency of having a negative disposition to people from other countries is there and it's hidden. And obviously, as a country and as a government, we are completely against xenophobia. We are not a xenophobic country. In fact, South Africa has opened its arms to people from other nations. And this has been the case even from the time when South Africa started to industrialize, when a number of workers came from a number of countries in the region, from as far afield as Malawi and Zambia, Angola. They came to work here and they made South Africa their home. And we are saying we want that to remain being the case. And interestingly, many other countries on the continent are having to deal with precisely that. And that is why sometimes you have these iterations where borders are closed and people are expelled. We've never done that. We've always held back from doing precisely that. But now and again, there have been surges that have been very, very negative and have projected us very negatively on the continent. But what we must say is that as a government and as a people, we are not xenophobic. We want to live in peace with all other people from other nations. We are now embarking on a major project to address this because it's a societal problem. Just like gender-based violence, it's a societal problem. And between myself and President Buhari, we've decided that we are going to set up an entity which is going to be an early warning system type of entity, where we are going to be able to decipher what is happening amongst our people broadly, but at the same time embark on other programs that are going to help to educate our people generally in South Africa. But at the same time, we've got to deal with challenges that our own people have. Challenges where they have a sense that people from other nations are taking their jobs, or the jobs that they should have. They're taking opportunities on service delivery. They are getting more service delivery or offerings that they should have. So it's a fault line that we need to address on an ongoing basis. But we remain committed to looking after our own people, providing good services to them, but at the same time addressing this issue of migration, because it is a major challenge.
Now, Mr. President, we have one last question from the conference at the Sandton Convention Centre from CNBC Africa's Karabo Letlatla. Karabo.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, we have seen a deterioration of South Africa's fiscal stance since the February budget till the October budget, and unemployment has also skyrocketed to an 11-year high.
Isn't part of the problem the fact that South Africa still has such stringent labor laws, therefore putting off all the opportunities we could be creating around employment? Thank you very much.
What do you say?
Well, I've often asked, what are those labor laws that people would highlight as preventing more employment to be created? And no one has really been able to tell me definitively. The one that they've raised of late is the national minimum wage. Research is underway now to see what negative impacts the national minimum wage is having. Early indications seem to indicate that it's not as negative as people have actually said it is. We've got very modern and progressive labor laws that are endorsed by the International Labour Organization and that many other countries want to emulate as well. And not talking as a person who has his history in labor, I would say that working people have to be protected and they have their own rights that are enshrined in our Constitution. We need to respect those. But where there are obviously issues that people can highlight that impede the employment of people, I'm prepared to listen and to see how best we can address those. But up to now, none have been really put on my table to say this is having a negative impact. People have been skirting around. One of the things that we had to address, for instance, was what happens during strikes. We addressed that together with labor and found solutions. That was highlighted as a major, major challenge by business, and together with labor and business and government, we were able to find a solution around that. So wherever there are problems and challenges, I've said we want to be able to sit down and reach some consensus around it.
And one final question from me, Mr. President. I've always wanted to ask you this. Not forgetting that I'm old enough to remember you were the man who held the microphone on Cape Town, the balcony of Cape Town, when Nelson Mandela was released. You're a man who made your own money before you came back into politics. I've always thought that you're a man, perhaps idealistically, who wants to put your name up there with Nelson Mandela in the history of your country. Is that your aim?
No, it's not so much my aim to put my name up. It's much more the work that needs to be done to improve the lives of our people. And it is up to people like me and many others who are also here to do the best that we can to address the challenges, because in the main we have been given an opportunity, maybe by history, to make a contribution. We sit in positions where we are a lot better off than the majority of our people, and to those unto whom a lot is given, much more is expected, and so therefore much more is expected from us, like it was expected from Nelson Mandela. Much as he had suffered so much in prison, the nation, history, providence expected much more from him to lead the nation and to ensure that our people get a better life. So my objective is to play my own small, tiny role, small, to make a contribution that history will forget in time. That's fine, as long as I've played a role.
Thank you very much indeed, President Cyril Ramaphosa of the Republic of South Africa, for taking part in this historic continent-wide CNBC Africa broadcast. Also, thank you very much to our studio guests. Thanks to our bureaus in Lagos and Kigali, and thank you very much to our team out there at the Convention Centre. I hope you've enjoyed this broadcast. We've had more than 60 minutes with the President. Thank you very much indeed for watching, and goodbye from me, Chris Bishop, and the team. It's goodbye.